여기가 맛있다고 글을 많이 보게 돼서 찾아오게 됐어요.
진짜 맛있어요. 네.
Presiding over Monday's cabinet meeting following his latest diplomatic agenda in New York, President Yoon
South Korea's economy will grow.
The central bank has kept its key interest rate unchanged. Mission complete. Foreign rocket booty fell to the street. Seoul is rallying in hopes of bringing the World Expo 2030. Arirang.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, February 4th, here in South Korea, President Yoon attends the fifth hearing of his impeachment trial at the Constitutional Court today that included a number of key witness testimonies. Meanwhile, U.S. tariffs on Canada and Mexico have been delayed for 30 days to allow for a period of negotiations on drug smuggling and illegal immigration. Back here in Seoul, OpenAI founder Sam Altman is in the capital city to advance AI collaboration with Korean businesses as China makes remarkable strides in the field. We start today at the Constitutional Court, where the fifth hearing of the impeachment trial against President Yoon began this afternoon. Now, for more on this, I have our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young standing by live. Soo-young, it's good to have you on. So I understand today's hearing included an interesting lineup of key witnesses. Do tell us more.
Good afternoon, Sunny. Sure. So President Yoon's fifth impeachment trial hearing began today at 2 p.m. With his attendance again and three testimonies set for 90 minutes each. And the three witnesses attending the court today, now they were key figures involved in the execution of martial law on December 3rd and considered as rather unfavourable witnesses for President Yoon based on the previous statements that they've given to state prosecutors. Now, the questioning began with Lee Jin-woo, former commander of the Capital Defense Command. He has reportedly claimed he received 3 phone calls from Yoon and countless calls from former Defense Minister Kim Yong-yeon to deploy martial law forces, storm the National Assembly by force, and drag out legislators to stop them from overturning martial law. However, when he showed up at the Constitutional Court today, he refused to confirm or answer most questions posed by the National Assembly about whether he had received calls or orders from President Yoon. While he said he could not respond to certain questions relevant to his ongoing criminal case, he did selectively answer some. He in fact denied that he'd been given any orders from President Yoon to arrest lawmakers. When asked whether the former defense minister instructed him to deploy forces to the parliament to prevent lawmakers from entering or to block them from lifting martial law, he said that he had not. While emphasizing that he hadn't known about that the martial law would be declared, he said that he did not consider it unlawful or unconstitutional, but accepted it as a strategic guideline, as he said, by the nation's leader, and said he followed orders by the defense minister prior to the declaration to be on standby at the base.
Right. Seong, I hear a second witness is on the stand as we speak.
That's right, Sonny. So the second speaker, the second witness rather, is Yo In-young, who is the former chief of the Defense Counterintelligence Command. He's now being questioned as we speak. And Yo, according to state investigators, he testified that he had been ordered by former Defense Minister Kim Yong-yeon to arrest certain politicians. Now, we're going to have to see whether he's more responsive to the questions than Lee Jin-woo. Next is Hong Jang-won, former First Deputy Director of the National Intelligence Service. He has said that he was informed of the arrests to be made and was told to, quote, seize them all this time for a total cleanup. Now, President Yoon has denied all of these major allegations, so the hearing today could feature more conflicting testimonies, but the court has banned him from asking questions himself.
Right. Seong, I realize that it may be tough to tell, but when can we expect an actual verdict?
Well, for now, the court has scheduled 3 more hearings until next Thursday, but it's quite unclear whether the Constitutional Court will be able to wrap up the case by then, or whether they'll choose to hear from more witnesses, which of course would inevitably prolong the trial. And based on the court's current schedule, a verdict could be out by the end of the month or by early March, given that it took 10 days to deliver a ruling on former President Park Geun-hye's trial and 14 days in the case of former President Roh Moo-hyun. But the conflicting testimonies may require more witnesses for cross-checking and verification of whether Yoon directly issued martial law orders, whether the decrees were constitutional or not, and also whether the president had pre-planned the martial law. Yoon's team has applied for at least 31 witnesses, according to the press officer today, and the court is still reviewing the candidates. Also, as Yoon's representatives continue to fiercely challenge the court's proceedings, experts say the trial could also be lengthened. However, most do believe that the ruling will be made before 2 justices retire from the bench on April 18th to avoid further procedural delays and complications.
All right, Seong, thank you for that coverage. That was our Oh Soo-young with the latest on the president's impeachment trial at the Constitutional Court. Now, meanwhile, at the Seoul Detention Center earlier this afternoon, people backing the president gathered outside the center, braving the day's frigid conditions to share their moral support. Our Choi Min-jung was there.
A freezing cold Tuesday. Despite the bitterly cold weather, dozens of President Yoon Suk-yeol's supporters gathered at the Seoul Detention Center to cheer for Yoon, with the president heading to the Constitutional Court for the 5th hearing of his impeachment trial. Supporters sang and chanted loudly, banging on drums. One supporter attempted to enter the detention center but was stopped by police. There was also a small number of people protesting in favor of Yoon's impeachment. The police has deployed heavy security and buses on site to prevent any potential physical clashes between those for and against the impeachment. On Wednesday, officials from the National Assembly's Special Committee on the Insurrection Investigation are scheduled to visit the detention center to question Yoon in person, as he has refused to attend previous committee hearings. But it remains to be seen whether Yoon will comply with the investigation. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
U.S. tariffs on Canada and Mexico have been delayed for 30 days, but the additional 10% tax on Chinese imports have been put in place. Our An Sung-jin reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump's 10% tariff on Chinese products took effect just after midnight Tuesday. This means that all Chinese goods going into the country will be levied under the trade measures. China immediately hit back with retaliatory taxes of its own. The country's Customs Tariff Commission of the State Council announced that certain U.S. products, such as petroleum or agricultural machinery, will have a 10% tariff, while coal and LNG will be levied 15%, starting on the 10th. This comes as Trump stated that he will be talking with China on deals regarding stopping the flow of fentanyl in the Panama Canal. However, whether Trump will strike a deal with China remains unclear, as Beijing's ambassador to the United Nations, Fu Chang, reaffirmed the country's position during a press conference at the UN headquarters early Tuesday, stating that China will file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization and implement countermeasures regarding Trump's tariffs. Unlike China, less than a day ahead of Trump's imposition of 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, the tariffs have been postponed for at least a month. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Monday local time posted on X that he had a good call with President Trump, signaling that a deal has been struck. The deal includes implementing a $1.3 billion border plan, which includes reinforcing the border with nearly 10,000 frontline personnel, as well as strengthening resources to respond to fentanyl and money laundering. The agreement with Canada comes only hours after Trump announced a similar deal with Mexico. Just a day before U.S. tariffs were to take place, Mexico agreed to also place 10,000 National Guard troops along the U.S. border to prevent the flow of drugs.
I told him we wanted him to pause the tariffs, so we've reached that agreement. I'm sure that during this month, we'll be able to deliver good results for his people and the people of Mexico.
Over the next month, the U.S. and Mexico will be negotiating on trade and security issues before a final decision on whether to implement full tariffs. Concerns over a global tariff war sparked by Trump are still high, as he also warned of tariffs to the European Union.
When targeted, unfairly or arbitrarily, the European Union will respond firmly.
Whether these trial periods for Canada and Mexico will lead to successful tariff deals is unclear. Negotiations could see the U.S. adding on trade issues, and concrete results may not appear regarding drug trafficking or illegal immigration issues. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Well, for now, though, the decision to delay Trump tariffs on major U.S. trade partners kept its stock market from sinking deeper during Monday's trade. Our Lee Seung-jae has the closing numbers.
On the first day of Wall Street trading since U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement of 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico and an additional 10% tariff on China, major indexes saw major sell-offs. However, major sell-offs slowed as Trump announced that he would put a hold on the 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada in order for negotiations to take place. By the end of Monday's trading, the S&P 500 fell just 0.8%, while the Dow lost 122 points, or 0.3%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq fell 1.2%. Still, major tech and auto shares fell on the day due to concerns that an intensified trade conflict due to Trump's tariffs and the response from affected countries could hamper sales. America's largest car maker, General Motors, fell as much as 7% during pre-market trading Monday, before recovering to trade over 3% lower from its previous trading session. Stellantis NV also fell nearly 4% by the end of Monday's session. Apple, which relies heavily on Chinese labor for its production, also saw its share fall over 3%. However, Bitcoin, which fell over the week, rebounded to above $100,000 again. According to US-based cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase, as of 8 a.m. Korea Standard Time, the price of Bitcoin stood at over $101,700. Concerns still remain for South Korea's currency market as the greenback continues to strengthen against the won amid Trump's protectionist policies. According to the Seoul Money Brokerage, as of 2 a.m. Tuesday morning, the won fell 9.31 against the US dollar to close at 1,462 won. 이승재, Arirang News.
And starting this week, the government will put into action its plan aimed at supporting public livelihood and the broader economy. Now, intentions to this end were shared at a cabinet meeting on this Tuesday, during which acting President Choi Sang-mok added close monitoring of economic trends on a weekly basis will be followed by at least one tangible response measure each week. Emphasis has been placed on the execution of effective measures to support the economy within the first quarter of this year. Such efforts include revising regulations or temporarily easing them to allow for better adaptation to emerging challenges as Korea too braces for US tariffs. And at the National Assembly, the ruling party has proposed permitting flexibility in work hours for those in the chip industry to allow for a strategic edge over the competition in the global AI race. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
How can South Korea's semiconductor industry further boost its global competitiveness amid ongoing shifts in the global AI market? The ruling People Power Party has suggested an exception to the current labor law so that employees in the sector could work for more than 52 hours per week, the limit laid out under Korea's labor law.
The competitiveness of our semiconductor industry is weakening due to rigid operations based on a 52-hour work week. The legal restriction is blocking R&D and production line operations, despite the lack of time facing us.
In a discussion with the Ministers of Trade and Labor held at the National Assembly on Tuesday, lawmakers suggested the legislation of a special act that will allow for a labor law exemption that will enable research professionals to work for longer than 52 hours per week. The special act also aims to provide firms with additional government subsidies to support their growth. The ruling party urged the opposition parties to join them in the efforts so the special act can be approved this month, with acting President Choi Sang-mok also showing his support on Tuesday, saying the National Assembly should conclude the special act and other key economy-related bills during its February session. The leader of the main opposition Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung, the day before had spoken favorably of giving the semiconductor industry flexibility in its working conditions, but with restrictions. Lee said at a related debate on Monday that while he hasn't come up with conclusions, he would consider allowing high-income research professionals to work longer in certain periods of the year if the workers themselves agree to it. Meanwhile, the ruling party and government officials also discussed measures to resolve unsold housing issues occurring in non-capital regions in the country, as well as further livelihood measures for those in need, including grocery vouchers for the financially vulnerable, as well as support for small business owners, workers in jobs with weak stability, and for young people. Tuesday's discussions came following the release of DeepSeek's open-source AI chatbot last month, which has impacted the global AI development environment, and the recent imposition of tariffs by the newly launched Trump administration that is posing increased risks to South Korean firms. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Also today, the government and rival political parties have agreed to meet for talks early next week. Now, acting President Choi Sang-mok, National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik, ruling People Power Party Interim Chairman Kwon Young-se, and main opposition Democratic Party Chairman Lee Jae-myung will partake in the upcoming meeting that will address matters related to supporting the economy. Now, these include a special act in support of the semiconductor industry, a supplementary budget, and pension reform. In other news, OpenAI founder Sam Altman is here in Seoul for a number of events and meetings aimed at advancing AI collaboration. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin covers his agenda.
ChatGPT developer OpenAI is looking to expand its presence in the South Korean market as Chinese startup DeepSeek poses a challenge to its position in the tech industry. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, during a closed-door workshop held in Seoul on Tuesday, said that with its robust semiconductor and energy industries, Korea is a country that is actively adopting artificial intelligence. This marks Altman's third visit to South Korea and the first time an official OpenAI event took place in the country. As part of its efforts to stay competitive, OpenAI announced that it has entered into a joint strategic partnership with South Korea's leading messaging app operator, Kakao. Kakao CEO Chung Shin-ah said on Tuesday that upcoming key Kakao services such as Karana, an AI-integrated messenger app, will utilize OpenAI's latest AI technology APIs, application programming interfaces that allow developers to integrate OpenAI's language models such as ChatGPT into their own apps. But Kakao isn't the only Korean company OpenAI is planning to work more closely with, as Altman also met with SK Group chairman Choi Tae-won immediately after the workshop on Tuesday. Choi and Altman reportedly discussed potential areas of collaboration between OpenAI and SK Group, such as the supply of high-bandwidth memory from SK Hynix and the construction of an AI data center by SK Telecom. And in the afternoon, Altman met with Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Jae-yong and SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son, who flew in from Japan in the morning to attend the meeting. This comes after SoftBank and OpenAI on Monday agreed to set up a joint venture in Japan, with SoftBank also committing to investing $3 billion annually to utilize OpenAI's technology. The three are expected to discuss ways to expand AI collaboration, namely Samsung Electronics' potential participation in the Stargate project, a $500 billion AI infrastructure initiative supported by U.S. President Donald Trump. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Pre-sales of Samsung's Galaxy S25 series here in Korea have soared past an earlier record. According to company officials today, 1.3 million units of their latest smartphone series were sold in less than 2 weeks. Now, the previous record was set last year with over 1.2 million units of the Galaxy S24 series. The newest S25 lineup has been applauded for its advanced AI features offered at the same price range as its S24 counterpart. In the Middle East, at least 20 people were killed in a car bomb attack in the northern Syria part of the country, Syria that is, on Monday. According to authorities there, a car filled with explosives blew up next to a truck carrying agricultural workers, most of them female. The Syrian leadership has vowed to bring those responsible for the appalling assault to justice, but no one has claimed responsibility for the attack as of yet.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. On February 3rd, European Union leaders gathered in Brussels for informal discussions centered on defense and security. The meeting addressed concerns over potential U.S. tariffs on European goods, as indicated by President Donald Trump. While French President Emmanuel Macron stressed Europe's need to assert itself if its commercial interests are threatened, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz expressed a preference for cooperation. Other leaders, including Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, also highlighted the negative implications of a trade war and the importance of unity. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also joined the bloc's 27 leaders in the meeting. Starmer became the first UK Prime Minister to attend an EU leaders meeting since the country left the bloc 5 years ago. In Greece, the tourist island of Santorini is on alert after more than 200 undersea earthquakes were recorded between February 1st and 3rd. The most substantial quake, a magnitude 4.8, occurred on Monday local time, leading to landslides and rock slides on the island. In response, authorities have closed schools in related areas, advised residents and tourists to avoid abandoned buildings, and issued tsunami warnings. Emergency teams, including rescue units and medical personnel, have been deployed as a precaution. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has urged residents to stay calm and adhere to protection guidelines. The frequency and intensity of the recent quakes have led to many residents to temporarily leave the island. In Russia, an explosion in the lobby of a luxury apartment complex in Moscow has killed pro-Russian paramilitary leader Armen Sarkisian and his bodyguard. 3 others were injured. Russian authorities labeled the bombing in the Scarlet Seals luxury apartment complex on Monday local time a carefully planned assassination, as the explosive device reportedly detonated remotely just as Sarkisian entered the lobby. Sarkisian was the founder of the Arbit Battalion, a pro-Russian militia operating in eastern Ukraine. He had been accused by Ukraine's security service of participating in illegal armed groups and organizing pro-Russian military units. In the UK, London Zoo on Monday celebrated the successful breeding of 33 endangered Darwin's froglets following a rescue mission from a forest in southern Chile. In October 2024, a team of conservationists collected 52 healthy Darwin's frogs and transported them to London in climate-controlled conditions. A devastating fungus had caused a 90% decline in the population of Darwin's frogs in Chile since 2023. The amphibians, named after naturalist Charles Darwin, are known for their unique behavior, where males carry developing tadpoles in their vocal sacs for safety. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
With the first cold wave warning issued in Seoul this year, the cold wave reached its peak nationwide today. The coldest place this morning was mountain Seorak, where temperatures plummeted to nearly minus 23 degrees Celsius. While the cold wave warnings continue to be expanded, this cold spell will freeze the country tomorrow as well. As this powerful cold wave passes through the West Sea, heavy snow clouds formed around the west coast areas and Jeju Island. Even more snow is expected from dawn tomorrow. By Thursday, heavy snow of up to 40 centimeters or more is expected in the mountainous areas of Jeju Island, and more than 30 centimeters is in Jeollabuk-do province. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will be as cold as today, dropping to minus 12 degrees Celsius, Gwangju and Busan at minus 6 degrees. Seoul will move up to minus 5 degrees, and Chuncheon will move up to minus 4 degrees. Freezing cold weather will remain this whole week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Right, those are the headlines at this hour. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. Do stay with us, and thank you for now.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. Laptop ID, smartphone, jacket, whatever that can mark your territory. But no bites. It's a little too big. Step 2. Pick up. We do not ask or call your name. We call out, B69 고객님. The buzzer will vibrate when your order is ready at the counter. Wait, got your straw? Keep the top of the wrapper on. Doing this is more hygienic. Step 3. Cafe etiquette. If you need to use your laptop, find a seat next to a socket. No extra charge for using electricity. But if you're staying over 3 hours, how about ordering another drink or dessert? Step 4. Last bite standing. There's a mysterious custom in Korea. The last bite standing. When there's about 1 bite left of that cake, nobody will go for it. You might be tempted, but don't be hasty. Right before you get up, take the last piece saying that you simply can't waste food, or just leave it. It will save a few calories. Did you survive at the cafe? Did someone behind the counter catch your eye? Go for the same drink every single day.
오늘도 아이스 말차 라떼 드실 거죠?
You might make an impression.
U.S. tariffs on Canada and Mexico have been delayed for 30 days to allow for a period of negotiations between the U.S. and its neighbors on drug smuggling and illegal immigration. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, February 4th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we address the first set of tariffs announced by the Trump administration and their implications for other U.S. trade partners, including South Korea. For more, I have Lee Ji-hoon, a correspondent for Reuters, here in the studio. Ji-hoon, welcome back.
Good evening.
I also have Professor Yang Jun-seok at the Catholic University of Korea joining this session virtually. Professor Yang, as always, it's great to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
Right, we shall start here in the studio. Ji-hoon, let's begin with details about the delay to implement the 25% U.S. tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which we had expected to take effect today. Could you walk us through the events that led to this dramatic pause, if you will?
Yeah, it started last Saturday when U.S. President Donald Trump signed executive orders to impose 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada and 10% tariffs on imports from China starting today. He said the measures are aimed at preventing illegal immigration and drug smuggling into the U.S., and that the measures will stay in place until what he called a national emergency ends. That prompted Canada and Mexico to respond immediately with countermeasures such as tariffs. While Trump went on to say he was also considering tariffs on other countries or regions such as Europe, though he did not give a specific timeline. And that raised worries about a global trade war in global financial markets yesterday, including here in South Korea, which is heavily dependent on exports, of course. On Monday, the Kospi fell 2.5%, which was the biggest daily drop since early December. And that came despite the fact that financial markets had already been pricing in the anticipated tariffs since late last year when Trump won the presidential election. Among South Korean stocks, losses were especially heavy in exporting companies such as auto, battery, and chip makers. And Kia, for example, fell 6% on worries that its factory in Mexico might be affected by the tariffs. LG Electronics, which also has a factory in Mexico, dropped 7% to the lowest in more than 2 years. But then a lot changed overnight after Trump had phone calls with leaders of Mexico and Canada. During the phone calls, Mexico and Canada promised efforts to crack down on illegal immigration and drug smuggling. And in response, Trump decided to postpone the tariffs for 30 days. And during the time, he said he would try to negotiate a trade deal with the two countries. Today, the Kospi rebounded as analysts said the series of events raised hopes that Trump's tariffs could be just bargaining chips for trade negotiations and less likely to be implemented in reality.
Right. So while the 25% U.S. tariff on Canada and Mexico have been delayed for 30 days, Chewd, I understand the additional 10% tax on Chinese imports have actually gone into effect. What's the latest on that front?
Okay. The 10% tariff on China started to take effect as of 2 p.m. today, Seoul time, which was midnight in Washington, D.C. That is lower than the 60% Trump previously talked about, but he said he might raise it higher, and experts say there is a possibility of gradual increases over the year. And China also responded immediately, introducing tariffs against tariffs on imports from the United States. Its finance ministry said this afternoon that new tariffs of 15% will be imposed on energy imports from the U.S. and additional 10% on imports of crude oil and automobiles from the United States from next week.
From next week, then.
Meanwhile, in South Korea, acting President Choi Sang-mok said today that domestic companies manufacturing cars, batteries, and home appliances, they are already being affected by the tariffs. He said the government will prepare an emergency trade strategy and utilize all available resources to mitigate the impact of U.S. tariffs on domestic companies. He also said the government will prepare support for companies restructuring supply chains due to tariffs, which is a move similar to Taiwan's promise that it will help companies planning to relocate their operations after tariffs are implemented.
Right, so that would be the response measures from the acting president here in South Korea, Choi Sang-mok. Professor Yang, what look to be the broader implications of such trade confrontations, if you will, between the U.S. and its trade partners on the global economy?
Okay, well, let's look at what would have happened if Trump did put the tariffs on Canada, Mexico. Yale Budget Lab has calculated that if 25% tariffs were put on Canada and Mexico and 10% tariffs on China, over the period of 2026 to 2035, U.S. GDP would fall by 0.4% to 0.6 percentage points, and PCE inflation would rise by 0.7 to 0.8 percentage points, depending on whether there's retaliation or not. Consulting firm EY has said that if the tariffs had gone into effect, the Yale Budget Lab figures were over the next 10 years, but just this year, inflation would rise by 0.4 percentage points. And then Canada and Mexico would likely go into recession because so much of their economy depends on U.S. Exports. Canada, about 25% of their GDP goes to American exports. Mexico, about 32% of their GDP goes to U.S. exports. So it would have been a major shock to those economies, and they would have gone into recession in all likelihood. But it would have been, I think, the Yale Lab numbers sort of underestimate what possible impact it could have had on the United States, because some products from Canada and Mexico cannot be easily replaced by other sources, especially American sources. And then supply chains of U.S., Canada, and Mexico are integrated, especially in manufactured goods like automobiles. So you have parts going in and out of the borders multiple times before they end up in a car. That would have added substantial costs to American-produced automobiles for American consumers. So I think some of these simulations underestimate the potential damage for the United States and the global economy. But the United States is the strongest advanced economy right now, and they're likely to remain the engine of growth for the global economy for 2025. So if they have tariffs and close off the economy, and because of the tariffs, they go into a slower growth mode, then obviously the entire global growth will fall. No one knows exactly how much, but it will have consequences for global growth, not only for the United States, Canada, and Mexico, but for other countries as well.
Right. Yoon, quite a number of pundits have echoed the concerns shared by Professor Yang with regard to inflation, a potential surge in inflation in the U.S. amid, of course, the presence of Trump tariffs. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
This week already, there have been numerous investment banks publishing reports about the impact of U.S. tariffs on the U.S. economy. And many of them say there is a possibility of the tariffs reigniting inflation pressure because companies are likely to pass on higher costs to consumers. For example, Societe Generale, a French investment bank, expects Trump's tariffs to raise consumer prices by 0.5% to 1%. And ANZ, the Australian New Zealand banking group, also expect tariffs to raise inflation by 0.2 or 0.3%. Oxford Economics in Britain, meanwhile, said U.S. core inflation could rise to more than 3% by the third quarter, along with downward pressure on consumer spending and employment. The U.S. National Foreign Trade Council said, quote-unquote, tariffs will raise the cost of everything from avocados to automobiles, urging policymakers to come up with a swift, quick solution. And because of that, many economists are also expecting the Federal Reserve's interest rate cuts will be delayed this year. after holding interest rates steady last week, following 3 consecutive rate cuts late last year. Fed Chair Jerome Powell last week said the central bank is not in rush to lower interest rates because inflation is still elevated. He said, quote unquote, we do not need to be in a hurry. So some investment banks like Nomura in Japan is expecting no more rate cuts by the Federal Reserve this year, or at least until June next year, because of inflation pressure that could be heightened due to the tariffs.
Right, I see. And speaking about tariffs again, for export-oriented countries like South Korea, of course, they are a great concern. That being said, for the first time in 16 months, June, Korea noted a fall in its exports last month, in January, that is. How are market observers explaining this fall?
So South Korea exports fell 10.3% in January, which was the first fall in 16 months, as you said, and the biggest drop in 1.5 years. Economists said the fall came after some front-loading of shipments and orders by foreign companies ahead of U.S. tariffs. China, especially, exports jumped 11% in December because firms wanted to avoid U.S. tariffs by shipping stocks in advance to the United States. Moreover, economists said demand is also weakening in the semiconductor sector, which led South Korea's export growth last year. Samsung Electronics, for example, said last week that its sales of AI chips will slow this quarter, and because of U.S. restrictions against China, and demand for semiconductors, computers, and smartphones are likely to be weak this quarter. In some sense, experts say the headline figure of 10.3% was distorted by the calendar effects of Lunar New Year holidays of this year being earlier and longer than last year, which means exports are likely to rebound in February. And there were other brighter signs as well. For example, the 10.3% drop was much milder than 15% seen in our survey. And PMI data also showed the manufacturing sector expanding in January thanks to continued growth in overseas demand. Still, many experts are saying there is high uncertainty over exports due to tariffs. According to Citi, which is a U.S. investment bank, South Korea exports are expected to fall about 1.1% in the first half of this year, and that is compared with 9% growth in the first quarter of last year and 7% growth in the second half.
Right, I see. And speaking about uncertainty, Professor Young, the uncertain fates of the former Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the Chips and Science Act under the new Trump administration, are causing quite a bit of concern within corporate Korea. What look to be the broader repercussions, Professor Young, of a retreat from these acts by President Trump on Korean companies?
Okay, well, Trump has said that he will revoke Green New Deal, but Green New Deal was the name of the law which never passed Congress, so he presumably means the environmental aspect of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, which deals with EVs, electric vehicles, and electric vehicle batteries. Now, the current U.S. Secretary of Commerce has said that he will stop all subsidy payments until he has a chance to examine them, and he has threatened, implied that he may cancel the subsidies. And while Trump has not targeted Korea directly, he is threatening tariffs on virtually everybody. And he has during his campaign, said that he wanted to replace subsidies for semiconductor factories with high tariffs so that the semiconductor makers will have to invest in the United States. So let's look at the two main industries separately. First, the semiconductor industry. Now, Korean companies investing in the United States semiconductor facilities, if they're getting any subsidies from the state governments, those are probably safe because state governments want those jobs, want those factories in their state. For federal subsidies, as I said, the Secretary of Commerce said that he has halted them for now and he will examine them. But if the Korean companies signed a contract, and they probably did at the end of the Biden administration, then Korea has the ways to get the money. But we have the semiconductor companies have to be brave enough to, if they do not get the money, sue the United States government and threaten that without the subsidies, they will withdraw from some of the investments because, well, the reason that United States is giving these subsidies is that United States cost is more expensive than Taiwan or Korea. So the companies will not be able to keep in the black if they have to operate in the United States without a subsidy. And if the United States do want to replace tariffs, then the tariff rate has to be higher than 20 to 30% because that's the cost differential. And that would mean major hardships for U.S. high-tech companies, including AI research. So I doubt if that's going to happen, or if they do, the United States will be shooting itself in the foot. Now, for electric vehicles and electric vehicle companies, they're in a more precarious position, but so are the American automakers who have invested in the EVs as well. Reportedly, the only company in the United States that can survive without subsidies is Tesla. So if they do decide to withdraw subsidies for EV and EV battery makers, that will affect the big three automakers in the United States as well as Japanese companies that invest in the United States like Toyota.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, moving forward, Yoon, earlier you talked about how the Korean stock market lost substantial ground in light of news about Trump tariffs. Of course, the market also responded sharply to news of remarkable advances in China's AI technology. What's the latest with regard to the local bourse?
Yeah, last Friday was another bad day for the Kospi. Last week, when South Korea was on holiday, there was a global tech rout after Chinese startup DeepSeek's launch of its new AI models, which is said are much smarter and cheaper than U.S. models. That raised skepticism over America's leading industry shares and concerns over U.S. chip makers supplying high-end chips for AI technology. For example, AI chipmaker NVIDIA fell 16% last week, which was the biggest in more than 2 years, as the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index fell 6%. Following that, last Friday, South Korea's stock market also fell sharply, with shares of SK Hynix posting its worst day since last August by falling 10%. In just one day, foreigners sold local stocks worth 1.2 trillion won, which was the biggest since late September. Having said that, there was some optimism as well because some domestic IT companies could benefit from cheap AI costs. On Friday, for example, in contrast to chip makers, software companies rallied, with Kakao rising 7%, while Naver rose 6%, which was the biggest jump in nearly a year. And this week, AI continues to be a major issue in the domestic stock market, with Kakao rallying again this week after it signed a partnership agreement with OpenAI to jointly develop AI products.
Right, indeed. And Professor Yang, on the broader corporate front, what are the implications of Chinese AI advances for Korean chip makers?
Okay, well, in the short term, I think because the American AI developers want to maintain their momentum and perhaps get on the leap over the Chinese DeepSeek, there might be an increase in investment, which means a higher demand for higher priced chips, the HBM chips. In the longer term, though, because DeepSeek is open source, some aspect of DeepSeek, especially how to do things more efficiently with less expensive equipment, I'm sure that will trickle down to American produced AI as well. So in the longer term, there might be a demand for the higher priced HBM chips may decline, but the demand for memory chips overall will probably be steady because they will be replacing the higher valued HBM chips with perhaps lesser priced chips like the DeepSeek did. On the other hand, because United States may seek to hinder DeepSeek development even more, some of these mid-level chips that Korea is now able to sell to China, well, the United States may put an export control over it to further hinder Chinese AI development.
Right, I see. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Professor Yang, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Hyun here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, that ends Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching and be sure to join us again same time tomorrow.